There's a moment when silence becomes louder than any song ever sung. And for Guy Penrod's millions of devoted fans around the world, that silence arrived like an unexpected storm on an otherwise peaceful day. Just 1 minute ago, the truth finally emerged from behind closed doors. And what his family revealed has left the entire gospel music community in absolute shock. Now, before we dive into what was actually said, and why it matters more than you might think, and need you to understand something crucial. This isn't just another celebrity story that'll fade away by tomorrow morning. This is about a man whose voice has literally carried people through their darkest valleys, whose hymns have echoed through hospital rooms and funeral services, whose music has been the soundtrack to countless moments of both celebration and grief. When rumors start swirling around someone like Guy Penrod, they don't just affect one family or one career. They ripple through an entire community of believers who've come to see him as more than just an entertainer. What his wife shared in her statement goes far deeper than simply denying false reports. And by the time you finish listening to this, you're going to understand exactly why this particular moment in gospel music history will be remembered for years to come. The truth she revealed wasn't what anyone expected. And the way she chose to address these rumors shows us something profound about faith, family, and the cost of living in the public eye. Let's talk about what actually happened here, because the story behind the story is where the real revelation lies. Over the past several weeks, social media platforms have been flooded with whispers, half-truths, and outright fabrications about Guy Penrod's health and family situation. These weren't just casual mentions or passing comments. We're talking about coordinated waves of speculation that seem to gain momentum with each passing day. Fan forums that usually celebrate his legacy suddenly became hotbeds of concern and confusion. People who had never met Guy personally were sharing detailed accounts of supposed tragedies, alleged health crises, and family emergencies that had absolutely no basis in reality. The interesting thing about modern rumor mills is how they feed on themselves, creating this self-sustaining cycle where each retelling adds another layer of drama, another degree of urgency, another reason to believe that something catastrophic must be happening behind the scenes. What started as perhaps an innocent misunderstanding or a misinterpreted social media post quickly snowballed into something far more damaging and pervasive. Friends and family members found themselves fielding panicked phone calls from well-meaning supporters who genuinely believed that Guy was facing his final days. Church congregations were organizing prayer chains based on information that had been completely distorted as it passed from person to person across the digital landscape. Now, here's where things get really interesting, and this is something you need to understand if you're going to grasp the full significance of what Guy Penrod's wife ultimately revealed. This pattern of rumor and speculation isn't actually new. It's been happening to public figures in the gospel music world for decades, but the internet has amplified it to unprecedented levels. Think about how information used to spread in the digital age. Someone would hear something at church, maybe mention it to a few friends, and by the time the story made its way across town, it might be completely unrecognizable from the original truth. But that process took time, and somewhere along the chain cooler heads usually prevailed and facts got checked. Today, a single tweet or Facebook post can reach millions of people in seconds, and once that information is out there, it takes on a life of its own. The psychology behind why people share these rumors is actually fascinating and reveals something important about human nature. When we hear that someone we admire might be suffering, there's an immediate impulse to share that information, partly out of genuine concern and partly because being the bearer of significant news makes us feel important and connected to something bigger than ourselves. We're not necessarily malicious when we hit that share button. We genuinely believe we're helping to mobilize prayer support or raise awareness. But what we're actually doing is participating in a system that can cause real harm to real people who are trying to live authentic lives while also maintaining appropriate boundaries between their public ministry and private reality. When Guy Penrod's wife finally decided to break her silence and address the mounting speculation, she did so with a combination of grace and firmness that honestly deserves our closest attention. Her statement wasn't a defensive rant or an angry rebuttal. It was a carefully measured response from someone who has clearly spent considerable time thinking about how to balance transparency with privacy, how to honor the concern of genuine supporters, while also setting appropriate boundaries against intrusive speculation. She began by acknowledging the paradox that every public figure faces. The very people who make your career possible through their support and loyalty are sometimes the same people whose concern can become overwhelming and invasive. She expressed genuine gratitude for the prayers that have been lifted up on behalf of their family, recognizing that these prayers come from a place of authentic love and spiritual connection. But then she did something really important. She gently but firmly drew a line between appropriate concern and harmful speculation. She pointed out that many of the rumors circulating online weren't just slightly exaggerated versions of truth. They were completely fabricated scenarios that bore no resemblance to their actual family situation. The challenge she faced in crafting this response was significant. How do you correct false information without inadvertently giving it more oxygen? How do you reassure concerned supporters without revealing more about your private life than you're comfortable sharing? How do you maintain the warmth and accessibility that have always characterized your relationship with fans, while also establishing that certain boundaries are non-negotiable? What makes her statement truly remarkable isn't just what she said about the specific rumors. It's the larger framework she provided for understanding how we should approach information about people's lives, especially when those people have dedicated themselves to ministry and public service. She talked about the importance of grounding ourselves in faith rather than fear, of choosing trust over suspicion, of extending the same grace to others that we hope to receive ourselves when we're misunderstood or misrepresented. This isn't just generic spiritual platitude. This is hard-won wisdom for someone who has spent decades navigating the complexities of being married to a man whose voice is recognized by millions, but whose private struggles and triumphs belong to a much smaller circle. She made a point that really resonates when you think about it carefully. Our fascination with potential tragedy often overshadows our celebration of ongoing blessing. We're quicker to believe and share bad news than we are to amplify good news. And this tendency reveals something about the human condition that should make us pause and reflect. The attention given to these death rumors was massive and immediate. But how much attention do we give to the actual positive work that Guy and his family continue to do? Discussions about gospel music personalities and ministry families. The actual cost of living a life that's simultaneously public and private, sacred and accessible. Guy Penrod didn't stumble into fame accidentally. He spent years honing his craft, performing in churches and small venues long before he became a household name in gospel music circles. His time with the Gator Vocal Band brought him to prominence, but it also brought a level of scrutiny and expectation that most people simply cannot comprehend unless they've experienced it themselves. When you're singing about eternal truths, when your music is meant to point people towards something infinitely greater than yourself, the stakes feel different than they do for secular performers. You're not just an entertainer who can have an off night and move on to the next city. You're carrying the weight of being an example, a representative of faith itself. This creates a unique pressure that affects every aspect of family life. His wife's statement touched on this when she referenced the challenges that life inevitably brings, acknowledging that their family isn't immune to difficulty, but also making clear that these normal human struggles will be fodder for public consumption or speculation. Ministry families deal with the same financial pressures, health concerns, relationship dynamics, and personal doubts that every family faces, but they do so under a microscope that never stops examining and judging. There's a profound principle embedded in what she shared, and it goes straight to the heart of why words matter so much more than we typically acknowledge in our casual scroll and share culture. Every rumor that gets repeated becomes more concrete in people's minds, even if it's to Tita's pure fiction. Psychologists call this the illusory truth effect, the tendency to believe information to be correct after repeated exposure. So when someone sees the same rumor about Guy Penrod's supposed health crisis posted by 3 different people over the course of a week, their brain starts to accept it as fact, regardless of whether any credible source has verified it. This is why his wife's decision to speak out wasn't just about correcting one specific set of rumors. It was about interrupting a pattern that had the potential to solidify into accepted truth if left unchallenged. She understood that silence in the face of persistent falsehood can sometimes be interpreted as confirmation. So speaking up became necessary, even though it required vulnerability and exposure she might have preferred to avoid. The careful way she chose her words reveals someone who understands the delicate balance required when you're trying to correct misinformation without sounding defensive, when you're trying to set boundaries without seeming ungrateful for genuine support, when you're trying to maintain privacy without appearing secretive or evasive. Throughout her statement, Guy Penrod's wife kept circling back to a central theme that deserves our full attention. Their family remains anchored in faith, unity, and gratitude regardless of external circumstances or public perception. This wasn't just a throwaway line meant to sound spiritual. It was a foundation upon which her entire response was built. When she emphasized faith, she was pointing to a source of stability that exists independent of public opinion, social media trends, or the ebb and flow of career success. This kind of rootedness doesn't develop overnight. It's cultivated through years of choosing to trust God, even when circumstances don't make sense, even when prayers seem unanswered, even when the path forward is unclear. The unity she referenced speaks to the intentional work required to keep a family connected and strong when external pressures are constantly trying to pull members in different directions. Ministry families face unique challenges in this area because the demands of serving others can sometimes compete with the need to nurture private relationships and maintain healthy boundaries. The fact that she specifically highlighted gratitude tells us something important about their mindset and approach to life. Gratitude isn't the absence of difficulty. It's the choice to recognize and honor blessings even in the midst of challenges. It's easy to be grateful when everything is going perfectly. But the kind of gratitude she's described is something deeper and more resilient. It's the kind that can coexist with struggle and uncertainty. Here's where we need to address something that became a focal point of the online speculation, and that her statement directly confronted the widespread assumption that there must be some hidden tragedy, some dramatic revelation waiting to be uncovered. This assumption reveals a lot about how we've been conditioned to consume information in the digital age. We've become accustomed to clickbait headlines that promise shocking revelations, to stories that take wild dramatic turns, to narratives that feed our appetite for sensationalism. So when rumors start circulating about a beloved public figure, we almost expect there to be some terrible truth lurking beneath the surface. Guy Penrod's wife made it explicitly clear. There is no hidden tragedy. There is no dramatic revelation. There is no secret crisis being covered up or minimized. This straightforward denial is actually quite radical in a culture that's grown skeptical of simple truths. One of the most strategic and spiritually mature aspects of her statement was how she redirected attention away from speculation and towards substance. Instead of getting bogged down in point-by-point reputations of every false rumor, she invited supporters to focus on what actually matters: the positive impact of Guy's music, the strength of her family bonds, and the message of hope they continue to share with the world. Guy Penrod's music has been a source of comfort and inspiration to countless people over decades of ministry. His renditions of classic hymns have introduced timeless truths to new generations of believers. His voice has provided a soundtrack for worship services, funerals, celebrations, and quiet moments of personal devotion across the globe. These are the things that matter. These are the things that will outlast any temporary rumor cycle. When she referenced the message of hope they continue to share, she was tapping into something that goes to the very heart of Guy Penrod's entire ministry and career. Hope isn't just one theme among many in gospel music. It's the central message that makes everything else make sense. The hope that Guy and his family represent isn't the shallow optimism that pretends problems don't exist.